At our 45th anniversary party, my wife Victoria took the microphone. She said, "This dance is for the man I've secretly loved for the past 10 years." Then she walked right past me and asked my brother Matthew to dance. Everyone clapped, thinking it was a joke. Later that night, I asked my daughter one simple question about our finances. My wife choked on her champagne, and my brother collapsed. If you have ever felt underestimated by the people you love most, hit that like button and tell me in the comments where you are watching from. My name is Benjamin Carter, and I was about to find out that my entire 45-year marriage was a lie. The crystal glasses chimed. Laughter echoed off the high ceilings of our Austin estate. From where I stood near the grand staircase, I could see the entire party. 200 people. Our friends, our family, all here to celebrate 45 years of marriage. My marriage. I'm Benjamin Carter. I'm 70 years old. And on that night, I believed I was the luckiest man in the world. I watched my wife Victoria as she moved through the crowd. She was 68, but in that silver dress, she was timeless. She was the reason I did it all. I looked around the room. The Italian marble floors I paid for. The crystal chandeliers Victoria had picked out. This was the empire I built. I thought back to the beginning. The tiny apartment in Houston, just me and her. The late nights I spent poring over blueprints smelling like concrete dust and cheap coffee. I was just a structural engineer with calloused hands and a dream. I built Carter Technical Solutions from scratch. From a rented desk and a single phone line, to a multi-million-dollar consulting firm that reshaped the Austin skyline. I did it. I promised Victoria the world, and I delivered. This $5 million house, the European vacations, the charity galas she chaired, her picture always in the society pages. I gave her everything. I did it so she would never have to worry about a single bill. So my family would be secure in a way I never was. My gaze shifted to the bar. And of course, there he was. My younger brother Matthew. Matt. 67 years old and still carrying the same lazy, dangerous charm he had at 17. He was leaning against my custom-built mahogany bar, nursing my best 25-year-old single malt. He was charming some woman half his age. I felt that familiar heavy twinge of annoyance. Matt was my cross to bear. The perpetual failure. The ideas guy who never followed through. How many times had I bailed him out? The failed restaurant in Dallas, the bad real estate venture in Miami, the gambling debts. God, the gambling debts. He was a black hole for money. My money. And Victoria? Victoria always defended him. "Ben, he's your brother," she would always say, her voice full of that misplaced sympathy. Family helps family, and I always gave in. I paid off the bookies. I settled the lawsuits. I funded the sure-thing startups that always failed. I did it because Victoria asked. Because keeping her happy, keeping the peace in my perfect home was my main job. "He seems happy tonight, Dad." My daughter Grace came up beside me. She's 42, smart. She works in finance in Dallas. She has my eyes, but her mother's composure. "He's always happy when the bourbon is free, honey," I said, trying to keep the bitterness out of my voice. "Be nice," she chided gently. "It's your night." She was right. I forced a smile. This was our night. My family. My successful daughter Grace. My loving wife Victoria. And Matt. He was family too, I supposed. I looked back at Victoria. She was so radiant. She caught my eye from across the room and blew me a kiss. My heart swelled. 45 years. We had made it. A few minutes later, the music softened. The band leader handed Victoria the microphone. The room fell silent. This was the moment. "Thank you all. Thank you all so much for coming," she began. Her voice was smooth and confident, the voice of a woman used to commanding a room. 45 years. She looked right at me, and I beamed. I felt Grace squeeze my arm. It's a long journey, Victoria continued. And I want to thank my husband, Ben. I nodded, puffing out my chest, just a little ready to accept the praise I had worked my whole life to earn. Ben, she said, pausing, you have always been so steadfast. Steadfast. It was an odd word, like calling a rock heavy. It wasn't loving or wonderful or my soulmate. It was just steadfast. But I let it slide. This was Victoria's moment. You gave me this beautiful life. She gestured around the room. But tonight, she paused again. A dramatic pause. She was always good at theater. Tonight, I want to dedicate this first dance, this very special dance. She locked eyes with someone across the room. I thought she was looking at me, but the angle was wrong. To the man I have secretly, truly loved for the past 10 years. The room gasped. Then it erupted in a wave of laughter and awes. Everyone thought it was a romantic joke, a funny theatrical build-up to her naming me. I chuckled along with them. What a strange, dramatic way to say it. But that was my Victoria. I straightened my tuxedo jacket. I took a step forward. My hand was outstretched, ready to take my wife, my partner of 45 years, onto the dance floor. I was smiling. I was the proud husband. I was the steadfast rock. I would soon find out, a complete and utter fool. Victoria stepped off the small stage. My hand was still outstretched. My smile was frozen on my face. She did not even look at me. She walked right past me. My arm, my outstretched hand just hung there in the empty air between us. I felt the heat rise up my neck. The laughter in the room did not just quiet down, it died. It was sucked into a vacuum. 200 pairs of eyes were on me, this old fool with his hand out, being ignored by his own wife at his own anniversary party. I slowly lowered my arm. I tried to turn my frozen smile into a casual chuckle, as if I was in on the joke. But there was no joke. I followed her gaze. It was locked onto the bar, locked onto him. My brother, Matthew. Matt was still leaning against the bar, but he was not looking at the woman he had been talking to anymore. He was looking right at Victoria. He was not surprised. He was waiting. I felt a cold dread settle in my stomach, pushing aside the humiliation. This was Matt, my younger brother by 3 years. He had spent his entire life coasting on his good looks and silver tongue. While I built an empire, he built a mountain of debt. I thought about the endless business opportunities, the failed restaurant in Dallas that went under in 6 months, the bad real estate venture in Miami that turned out to be a fraud, the nights I got calls from Vegas, from Atlantic City. Ben, I am in trouble. I just need a little help, just this one last time. And I always paid. I paid because he was my blood. I paid because my sainted mother on her deathbed made me promise to look after him. And I paid because Victoria always begged me to. He can't help himself, Ben, she would say. He just needs another chance. I had given him dozens of chances. I had given him hundreds of thousands of dollars. I had given him my time, my resources, my patience. And now I was watching my wife walk toward him as if he was the only man in the room. Victoria stopped right in front of him. The room was so quiet, I could hear the ice shifting in someone's glass. She looked up at him. I had seen that look before. It was the look she gave me on our wedding day 45 years ago. A look of pure, undivided adoration. She was not looking at her brother-in-law. She was looking at the love of her life. Then she said it. Her voice carried across the silent room. Matthew, will you dance with me? Matthew's lazy charm turned into a slow, triumphant smile. It was a smirk of victory. He did not say a word. He just put his half-finished glass of my expensive whiskey down on the bar. He took her hand. He did not just take her hand. He possessed it. He slid his other arm around her waist, pulling her close, and he led her onto the empty dance floor. For a second, the entire party remained frozen. The humiliation I felt was a physical thing. It was a fire burning my skin. Then someone in the back, probably one of Matt's idiot friends, started to clap. And the spell broke. A few others joined in. The clapping was awkward, hesitant. They still thought this was a show, a bizarre, elaborate, and deeply uncomfortable joke. "What a performance!" someone yelled, trying too hard. I could hear the whispers starting up like snakes in the grass. "Is this part of it? My God, look at Ben's face. They would not, would they? Dad?" Grace was at my elbow. Her face was pale, her eyes wide with confusion and worry. "Dad, what is happening? Is this a joke?" I could not answer her. I could not find my voice. I just stared at the center of the room. The band, looking confused, finally got a signal from Matt, a little flick of his head. And they started to play. A slow song, our song. Unchained melody, the song we danced to at our own wedding, and my wife Victoria was dancing to it. She was melting into my brother's arms. Her head was resting on his shoulder. His eyes were closed. They were not dancing. They were holding each other. I could not breathe. I could not watch. "Dad," Grace said again, grabbing my arm. I shook my head. I turned away from the scene. I turned away from my friends, my colleagues, my daughter. I pushed past a waiter holding a tray of champagne. The glasses rattled. I walked fast. I did not run. I would not give them that satisfaction. I walked my back straight, my fists clenched at my sides. I pushed open the swinging door to the kitchen. The sudden noise of clattering dishes and shouting cooks hit me like a wall. I did not stop. I walked past them all, past the heat of the ovens, past the walk-in freezer. I went out the back service door into the cool night air. I stood there in the alley next to the dumpsters, breathing in the smell of garbage and jasmine. My heart was hammering against my ribs so hard I thought it would break through. And behind me, through the thick walls, I could still hear the faint, haunting melody. Our song. They were still dancing. I did not stay in the alley long. The humiliation was too public. I could not hide. I pushed the service door back open and walked back into the chaos of the kitchen. The catering staff actively avoided my eyes. They knew. Everyone knew. I grabbed a clean cloth from a counter and wiped my face. My hands were shaking. I could feel a tremor in my knees. "Dad." Grace had followed me in. Her eyes were filled with a pained confusion. "Dad, are you okay? What was that? I don't understand." I opened my mouth to answer her, to tell her that I did not understand either. But before I could speak, the main swinging door burst open. Victoria and Matt entered, and they were laughing, actually laughing, like they had just shared the funniest story in the world. "Oh my God, Ben," Victoria said, fanning her face with her hand. She was breathless from laughter. "You should have seen your face. It was absolutely priceless. Your mouth just hung open." I stared at her. The woman I had loved for 45 years. The woman who had just humiliated me in front of everyone we knew. My voice came out low, a growl I did not recognize. "What in the hell was that, Victoria? What are you doing?" Matt stepped forward, all charm and easy smiles, holding his hands up in surrender. He slung a casual arm around my shoulder. I stiffened at his touch. "Come on, brother, lighten up," he said, his voice smooth as the whiskey he was drinking. "It was just a joke, you know me, always stirring the pot." I looked at him. I looked at my wife. A joke. "I dared her." Matt continued, squeezing my shoulder. $500. I told her, "I bet you won't dedicate the first dance to me," just to see the look on old Benny's face. He laughed again, that loud, careless laugh that had always grated on my nerves. Victoria joined in. "Exactly, Ben," she said, stepping forward to straighten my tuxedo jacket, a gesture that suddenly felt cold, rehearsed. "You are being so serious. You know how stuffy these parties get. People were falling asleep. They love a little drama. It's just fun." I looked at her, searching her eyes for any sign of remorse, any sign of the woman I married. I saw nothing but a bright, hard sparkle. "It got everyone talking, didn't it?" She smiled. "Now come on." She tucked her arm into mine. "Let's go back out there. Don't be a sore sport. Don't ruin our party." I looked past her at Grace. My daughter's face was awash with relief. She wanted to believe the lie. She needed it to be a joke because the alternative was too horrifying. I felt myself exhale. Maybe they were right. Maybe I was just an old man with no sense of humor. Maybe this was just a joke. A cruel, tasteless, humiliating joke, but a joke nonetheless. I let myself believe it. I had to believe it. "All right," I said, my voice hoarse. "All right. It was quite a joke, Matt." "That's the spirit," Matt boomed, slapping me on the back. "Come on, let's get you a real drink, brother. You look like you've seen a ghost." Victoria smiled that perfect, bright white smile. "See, all good. Now let's go. People are wondering where we went." She and Matt turned, leading the way, walking side by side out of the kitchen door. I took a step to follow them. And then I saw it. It was fast. So fast if I had blinked I would have missed it. As they were walking away, Victoria, thinking I was behind, her reached up. It was not a loving gesture. It was practical. She lifted her hand, her thumb and forefinger lightly brushing the corner of Matt's mouth. She pulled her hand back and glanced down at her thumb. I saw it clearly. A tiny smear of her signature siren red lipstick. She wiped it quick and discreet on the cocktail napkin she was still holding. Matt did not even flinch. He did not react at all. It was familiar. It was routine. I froze. My blood turned to ice water. A joke. He dared her to dance. They danced. Why would there be lipstick on his mouth? They walked out the door, and the sound of the party, the music, the laughter flooded back into the kitchen. I just stood there. I looked at my own shaking hands. 10 years, I whispered to the empty stainless steel room. It was not a joke. It was not a random number. It was a confession. And the only joke was me. The party ended. The guests went home whispering, I am sure. The caterers packed up the expensive, uneaten food. And for the next week, my life became a performance. We lived in a state of forced, suffocating normalcy. Victoria acted as if nothing had happened. She was bright. She was cheerful. She was, in fact, overly affectionate. Ben, would you like more coffee? She'd ask, her voice dripping with sugar. Ben, should we plan a trip to the lake house, just the two of us? It was all an act. She was trying too hard. And because I was now watching, because my eyes were finally open, I saw things I had been blind to for years. The biggest change was the phone. Victoria had always treated her phone like an annoyance, a necessary evil of the modern world. I remember that bright pink iPhone. It was always buried at the bottom of one of her $1,000 purses. It was always on silent. I would call her, and it would ring and ring straight to voicemail. Hours later, she would finally call me back. Oh, darling, I'm sorry. I didn't even hear it ring. She would leave it on the kitchen counter for half a day. She would forget it in the car overnight. It was just a device, not anymore. Now that phone was attached to her as if it were a vital organ. It was always in her hand, or tucked into the pocket of her silk robe. It was always face down on the table beside her at dinner. It went with her when she went to the garden. It even went with her when she took a bath. I would walk past the master bathroom door, and I could hear her. I could hear her faint laughter. I could hear the hushed, intimate tones of her voice. The moment I knocked, there was silence. Then her voice suddenly bright and loud. "Just a minute, Ben, I'm finishing up." This went on for days, the constant buzz of the phone from her purse, the way her eyes would light up when she looked at the screen, the small, secret smiles she tried to hide. We were sitting in the living room last night. It was almost 11 o'clock. We were pretending to read our books. Her phone buzzed on the arm of her chair. She snatched it up. She looked at the screen and she smiled. It was not a polite smile. It was a genuine, unguarded smile of pure delight. The kind of smile she used to give me, a long, long time ago. "Good news?" I asked. I tried to sound casual. I kept my eyes on my book. She jumped, startled, as if she had forgotten I was even in the room. "Oh, it's just the book club." She typed quickly, her thumbs flying across the screen. "Brenda is just being ridiculous about the ending of Where the Crawdads Sing. It's just silly gossip." "The book club, huh?" I said. I turned a page, the dry sound scraping the silence. "I didn't know you were so involved with it. You seem to be texting them constantly." Her fingers stopped typing. "Well, we have a lot to discuss," she said sharply, her voice suddenly cold. "It's what we do, Ben. We talk." She stood up abruptly, closing her book with a snap. "I think I'll go read in the sunroom. The light is better in there." She took her phone, and she left me alone in the living room. The book club lie was lazy. It was too easy, and it was the final piece of proof I needed. That night, I waited. I waited until 2 in the morning. I waited until I heard the sound of her deep, even breathing next to me in the dark. I slipped out of our bed. I went to my study. I closed the heavy oak doors, muffling any sound. I sat in my old leather chair, the one that smelled like my father's cigars. I turned on my computer. I am the steadfast man, after all. I am the one who pays the bills. I am the one who built this entire empire, and I have the passwords to everything. I logged into our family's mobile account, the main account, the one that listed all 5 lines mine, Victoria's, Grace's, and the 2 spare lines for the grandkids' iPads. I clicked on Victoria's usage details. My heart was pounding so hard I could feel it in my throat. I felt like a spy in my own home. I felt dirty. But that feeling was overwhelmed by a desperate, burning need to know the truth. The data loaded, the call log, the text log. I scrolled down, and down, and down. It was not silly gossip. There were hundreds of text messages. In the last 30 days, maybe thousands. And the calls. My God, the calls. 3-hour calls, 4-hour calls, calls that started at midnight and ended at 3 in the morning, on nights when I was sleeping right next to her, on nights when she told me she was too tired to even talk. I looked at the number. It was the same one, over and over and over. 95% of her entire phone activity was with this one number. A 713 area code. I did not need to look it up. I am a Texas businessman. I know my area codes. My hands were shaking. It was not her friend Brenda in Austin. It was not the book club. It was Houston. It was the city where Matthew lived. The proof on my computer screen burned into my memory. Houston. 2 days later, Houston came to me. I was in my study, the very room where I had uncovered the betrayal, when I heard Victoria's overly bright, false voice echoing from the foyer. "Ben, darling. Look who's here. Matt decided to surprise us." I felt my stomach tighten. I put down the quarterly reports I was pretending to read and walked out. And there he was. Matthew. He was standing in my entryway, as if he owned the place, wearing an expensive-looking linen shirt that I had a sick feeling I had probably paid for. He was all smiles. "Hey, brother, I was in the neighborhood, just checking on some new business opportunities in Austin. Thought I'd stop by." I kept my expression neutral. I looked at my brother, 3 years my junior, who had managed to fail upwards his entire life on my dime. "Business opportunities?" I asked, my voice flat. "What kind?" He waved his hand vaguely, a gesture I knew well. It was the gesture that meant, "It's complicated, and I don't want you to look too closely." And I noticed he avoided my eyes. "Oh, you know, tech stuff, real estate. Austin is booming. A guy like me has to keep his options open." A guy like him. A guy who hadn't worked a real steady 9-to-5 job in 2 decades. He walked past me, slapping me on the shoulder as he went heading straight for the bar. "You still keep that 25-year-old Macallan Benny," he called out, already reaching for the decanter. "My whiskey." I watched him pour a generous amount into one of my crystal glasses, and I thought about that number again. 10 years. Victoria's words at the party. The start of the phone calls. I remembered that time vividly. 10 years ago. It was the year of Matt's third and most spectacular failure, a luxury condo development in Miami. It turned out to be built on unstable land, both literally and financially. The investors were suing him for fraud. The banks were foreclosing. And Matt was facing criminal charges. I remembered the night he called me. He was not charming then. He was terrified. "Ben, they're going to put me in jail. I swear I didn't know the engineer's report was fake. You've got to help me." I was ready to let him face the music. I was done. I told him I was done. But then Victoria came to me. She came to me in this very study, her eyes red and swollen from crying. Her hands grasping my arm so tightly, her nails dug in. "Ben, please," she begged. "He's your brother. He's family. You can't let this happen. He'll be on the street. They'll destroy him in prison." I told her no. I told her I had already given him enough. But she kept crying. She collapsed right there on the Persian rug, sobbing. She said it would destroy her if I let my only brother go to prison. So I caved. I did what I always did to keep the peace, to keep my wife happy. I mortgaged our lake house on Lake Travis. The house I had built with my own hands, the place I planned to retire. I wired $400,000 to a team of slick lawyers in Florida to make it all go away. 10 years ago. The exact same time Victoria said her secret love began. Matt stayed for dinner. He charmed Victoria, telling her stories about his potential investors. He drank my wine. I watched them across the dining room table. The way they interacted. The shared glances when they thought I was not looking. The way her hand lingered on his arm when she passed him the salt. It was all there. It had probably been there for years, and I had been too busy, too trusting, too steadfast to notice. I felt sick to my stomach. After dinner, Matt went out to the patio to take an important call. Of course. Victoria immediately turned to me. Her face was arranged in that familiar mask of loving concern, the one she used when she wanted something. "Ben." She started, her voice soft and persuasive. "I am so glad Matt came, but I'm worried about him." I just looked at her. I did not speak. "He's really trying this time, darling. He's found a truly amazing opportunity. A green energy startup. It's foolproof. The investors are all lined up." I knew what was coming next. I had heard this exact speech a dozen times before. "He just needs a little bit of seed money," she continued, her eyes wide and pleading. "Just to secure his position. It's his absolute last chance to finally make something of himself." I stayed silent, letting her finish. "He just needs $50,000, Ben. That's all. 50,000. She smiled, a small, hopeful tremor at the edge of her mouth. "It's nothing to you. It's everything to him." There it was, the request, the real reason for the surprise visit, the reason for the charm, the laughter, the flattery. It was all just a setup for the next withdrawal from the Bank of Ben. She looked at me, her eyes wide, expectant. The same exact look she gave me when she begged for him 10 years ago. But something was different now. I was different. I was no longer the blind, accommodating husband. I was the man who had seen the lipstick. I was the man who had seen the phone bill from Houston. I looked at my wife, the woman who danced with another man at our anniversary, the woman who was stealing my money, the woman who was now lying to my face about more money. I let a small, cold smile touch my lips. "Victoria," I said, my voice dangerously calm, "I have spent hundreds of thousands of dollars on his last chances. No." I watched the hope in her eyes flicker. It was replaced just for a second by a flash of stunned disbelief. And then I saw it. A quick, hot spark of pure, unadulterated anger. Not this time. I stared at the empty doorway where she had been. The slam of the front door echoed through the house a moment later. I sat there in the silence of my study, the smell of her expensive perfume lingering in the air. Her anger. It wasn't the sound of disappointment. It was the sound of fury. It was the raw, desperate anger of a well-laid plan being denied. Her rage at me, refusing $50,000, was more real, more genuine than her laughter at the anniversary party. The joke was a lie, a clumsy performance. This was the truth. And then the number hit me. It clicked into place in my mind, with the heavy final sound of a deadbolt sliding shut. 10 years. The man I have secretly loved for the past 10 years. I grabbed a pen from my desk drawer, my hand steady. I pulled a yellow legal pad toward me. I wrote, 10 years ago. What happened 10 years ago? The memory came back instantly clear and sharp. The Miami condo disaster. Matt's third and most spectacular bankruptcy. The one where he wasn't just broke, he was facing criminal charges for fraud. I remembered him calling me not charming, then just a terrified, weeping man. "Ben, they're going to put me in jail. I swear I didn't know the engineer's report was fake. You've got to help me." I had been ready to let him face the consequences. I was done. But then Victoria had come to me right here in this study. She had fallen to her knees on this very Persian rug, sobbing, clinging to my arm. "He's your brother Ben. He's family. You can't let this happen. They'll destroy him in prison. It will destroy me." And to make her stop crying, to keep the peace in my perfect, orderly home, I caved. I mortgaged our lake house on Lake Travis. $400,000. Wired to a team of slick lawyers in Florida to make it all go away. That was exactly 10 years ago. A chill ran up my spine. And something else. 11 years ago. I had my health scare. A mild heart attack. Just a warning, the doctors said. I was 59 years old. I was in the hospital for 3 days. I remembered Victoria sitting by my bedside, holding my hand, her eyes filled with what I had thought it was fear for me. But what if it was fear for her future? The fear that her steadfast provider, her rock, might be starting to crumble. Was that when it started? Was that when she and Matt realized I was mortal? Was that when they decided they needed an insurance policy? My head was spinning. The humiliation at the party. The lipstick on his mouth. The endless secret calls to Houston. And now this sudden furious demand for $50,000. These were not isolated incidents. This was a pattern. A 10-year-long, carefully orchestrated plan. I needed proof. I needed facts. I could not trust my own feelings, not anymore. I needed someone outside this house. Someone clean. Someone I trusted. Not blood. Not my brother. Not my wife. My daughter. Grace. She was smart. But this was her mother. This would destroy her. But her husband, Rick, my son-in-law, Ricardo Lopez. Rick is a forensic accountant, a numbers guy. He's quiet, methodical. He sees the world in black and white, in profit and loss. And I knew deep down he was loyal. He was loyal to Grace, and because of that, he was loyal to me. My hand was steady now. The shaking had stopped. The anger had burned away, leaving a cold, clear purpose. I picked up my phone. I dialed his private number in Dallas. He answered on the second ring. Rick Lopez. Rick, it's Ben. There was a slight pause. Hey, Dad. Everything okay? You sound strange. I need your help, I said, my voice low. I need you to look into something for me. And it has to be completely confidential. Not even Grace can know. Not yet. Another pause. This one was longer, heavier. When he finally spoke, his voice was tight, careful. Dad, I'm glad you called. My blood ran cold. What do you mean? I've been seeing some things, he said, his voice dropping. I'm on the advisory panel for your main accounts, remember, just to oversee things for Grace's inheritance. I remember, I said, my grip tightening on the phone. Well, he said, and I heard him take a deep breath. I've been seeing some anomalies, large withdrawals, regular withdrawals from your joint brokerage account, the one Victoria has access to. I know about that, I said, thinking of the $50,000 request. It's Matt. No, Dad. I don't mean the small stuff. I'm talking about large transfers. I didn't want to say anything. I assumed you were making some private investments, diversifying your portfolio or something. What brokerage account? I asked, my voice sharp. The E-Trade account. I closed that. I moved all those assets into municipal bonds after the 2008 crash. No, Dad, you didn't. Rick said, his voice quiet, serious. You moved most of it, but you left an initial seed fund of $250,000 in the original account. You signed papers making Victoria a joint tenant with rights of survivorship. She has had full, unrestricted access to it for 11 years now. I was stunned. I had no memory of that. It must have been during the haze after my heart attack. I was signing dozens of documents my lawyers put in front of me. Wills, medical directives, tax forms. Victoria must have slipped that one in. And with dividends reinvested and market growth, Rick continued, that account, well, it became substantial. Dad, do you want me to look? Really look. I can run a full forensic trace right now. I gripped the phone, my knuckles white. The image of Victoria wiping the lipstick from Matt's mouth flashed in my mind. Her rage over the $50,000. Do it, I said, my voice like gravel. Check everything, every single transaction, now. On it, he replied, and the line went dead. I did not move. I sat in my leather chair, staring out the window of my study. The sun was bright, catching the afternoon light on Victoria's prize-winning roses. She loved that garden. She spent hours out there tending to it, pruning, weeding. She always said it was her sanctuary. I now realized she was as meticulous with her lies as she was with her flowers, pruning away any evidence, weeding out any suspicion. 30 minutes passed. It felt like 30 years. Every tick of the grandfather clock in the hall was a hammer blow. I thought about the 1.2 million. No, that was impossible. I had misheard. The phone buzzed on the desk, making me jump. I snatched it up. Rick. Dad. His voice was different. It was not just tense. It was cold. It was the voice of the forensic accountant who had just found the crime. It's worse than I thought. Way worse. Just tell me, I said. That account, Rick said, and I could hear him typing. Based on standard market performance, it should have a balance of approximately $2.5 million today. My heart hammered. Should have. Dad, it doesn't. Its current balance is 1.3 million. Over the last 10 years, starting exactly 10 years and 2 months ago, there have been regular quarterly transfers out. My mouth was dry. How much, Rick? How much total? $1.2 million, he said. I could not breathe. $1,200,000. Stolen. Siphoned away from me right under my nose while I was busy paying for their dinners, their cars, their lives. Where did it go? I whispered, though I already knew the answer. I knew it before he even said the name. It all went to the same place, Dad. Rick said, his voice grim. A single receiving account. A shell corporation registered in Delaware. I closed my eyes. Tell me the name, son. It's called V&M Holdings. V and M Victoria and Matthew, my wife, and my brother. They were so arrogant they put their own initials on their crime. I'm looking at the incorporation papers right now, Rick said, his voice tight with anger. It was filed 10 years ago. It lists only one officer, one sole proprietor. I waited for the final nail. The owner is Matthew Carter. I hung up the phone. I did not say goodbye. I just stared at the wall. $1.2 million. 10 years. The dance at the party wasn't a joke. It was a celebration. It was them dancing on my grave, laughing at the steadfast old fool who paid for the party. This was not just a secret love affair. This was a conspiracy. This was a decade-long million-dollar fraud, and I had funded the entire thing. I sat in that study for a long time. The phone felt heavy and cold in my hand. $1.2 million. The number did not feel real. It was an abstract, impossible figure. My first instinct was to storm downstairs. I wanted to find Victoria, to hold that phone bill up to her face, to scream at her, to ask her how she could sit across from me at dinner night after night for 10 years and lie. How she could cry in my arms when her father passed away. How she could plan our 45th anniversary party, all while she was systematically stealing from me. But I stopped myself. I took a deep breath. What would happen if I confronted her now? She would deny it. She would cry. She would twist it. She would say Rick made a mistake, that he was trying to drive a wedge between us. She would say I was the one who was paranoid and cruel. And Matt would back her up with that smooth, charming voice of his. It would be my word against theirs. No. Rick was securing the financial proof. That was the what. But I needed the why. I needed the one thing that would make it all undeniable. The financial crime was complex, but infidelity was simple. It was brutal. It was the one piece of evidence that would shatter their entire defense. I needed to catch them. I needed to see it with my own eyes. They wanted $50,000. They were arrogant. They thought I was a blind, steadfast old fool. They had just tried to get more money from the king they were robbing blind. Fine. I would use their greed against them. I would use that $50,000 as the bait. I waited an hour. I let the white-hot rage cool down into something hard and sharp. I went to the bathroom and looked at my own face in the mirror. The lines of betrayal were already setting in. I practiced my expression until the anger was gone. I just looked tired, defeated. I went downstairs. She was in the kitchen, humming, looking at a travel magazine for a cruise to Greece. My money, of course. She looked up as I entered, her face instantly forming a pout. The look of a woman who had been denied. "Oh, you're still here." "Victoria," I said. I let my shoulders slump. I shuffled my feet. I played the part of the steadfast, boring, predictable husband she had despised for a decade. I have been thinking." She watched me, her eyes wary. She was waiting for the apology. You were right. I said the words tasting like ash in my mouth. I was being too hard, too stingy. It's just money. I watched her expression shift. The coldness melted away, replaced by a tiny triumphant flicker in her eyes. She thought she had won. It's just 50,000 is a lot, I said, playing my part. But you're right. He's my brother. Family helps family. It was like a switch had been thrown. Her face lit up. It was a blinding, genuine smile of pure victory. "Oh, Ben," she cried out. She rushed over and threw her arms around my neck. "I knew you'd do the right thing. I knew you'd come through. Thank you. Thank you." I stood there rigid, my arms at my sides as she hugged me. I could smell her expensive perfume. The perfume I had bought her last Christmas. I felt nothing but cold. "He'll be so relieved, Ben," she said, pulling back. This is going to change everything for him." I gently removed her hands from my shoulders. "Yes, well," I said. "I want to do this right. I don't want to just wire the money. He and I haven't been close. Maybe this is a chance to fix that." Victoria looked at me, her head tilted, confused. "What do you mean?" "I mean, I'll take it to him," I said. "I'll write the check for 50,000, and I'll drive it to Houston myself, this Saturday." I watched her face. I saw the quick, sharp calculation in her eyes as she tried to see the angle. I did not let her find one. "I'll surprise him," I continued, building the lie. "I'll take him out for a nice steak dinner, just the two of us. Give him the check. Maybe we can finally talk, like brothers again." The calculation in her eyes vanished. It was replaced by pure, unadulterated joy. She was practically vibrating. She was not just happy about the money. She was happy that I would be gone. "Ben, that is the most wonderful idea you've had in years," she said, clapping her hands together like a child. "A surprise. He will be so happy. He'll be stunned. I might even stay the night," I added, twisting the knife I was sharpening. "Get a hotel. Make a weekend of it. We have a lot to catch up on." "You should." "You absolutely should," she gushed, her voice giddy. "It's perfect. He'll be so, so happy." I looked at her, my wife of 45 years, her face shining with excitement at the thought of my trip. She was right. One of them was certainly going to be happy. And I was pretty sure it was not going to be Matt. The trap was set. Saturday morning, 9 a.m. I packed an overnight bag. I put in my DOP kit, a change of clothes, and the empty checkbook for my business account, the one I had not used in 5 years. Victoria was humming in the kitchen. She was making me coffee for the road. She seemed lighter than I had seen her in months. Giddy. "Now you be nice to your brother Ben," she said, handing me the thermal mug. "This is a big step for him, for both of you." "I will," I lied. She walked me to the garage. She stood on her tiptoes and gave me a kiss. It felt like a peck from a stranger, dry and quick. "Drive safe, honey," she called out as I backed my Tesla out of the driveway. "Call me when you get to Houston. Let me know how the surprise goes." "Oh, I will," I said under my breath as I turned the corner. "I will let you know exactly how the surprise goes." I drove 2 blocks. I turned right. I drove another 3 blocks. Then I turned right again, circling the neighborhood. I pulled into the driveway of the Millers 4 houses down. I knew they were in Europe for the month. Their mail was being held. Their house was dark. I parked my car deep in their driveway, hidden behind their large, overgrown oak tree. It was invisible from the street. I got out carrying nothing but my phone. I walked silently along the back hedge line that connected our properties. This was my neighborhood. I had built half the houses on this street. I knew every shadow. I slipped through my own side gate, the one that led to the pool equipment. The pool house. We call it the casita. It is a full guest suite, a bedroom, a bathroom, a small kitchen, and most importantly, floor-to-ceiling windows that had a perfect, unobstructed view of the main house's back patio and living room. I used my own key. The lock clicked open softly. I slipped inside. The air was still and cool. I locked the door behind me and went to the main window. I sat down in the dark wicker armchair just out of sight. And I waited. 10 o'clock came. I saw Victoria come out onto the patio. She was on her phone. She was laughing, twirling a piece of her hair. She was talking to him. I knew it. She was talking to the 713 area code. She was telling him the surprise was on its way to Houston. She was telling him the coast was clear. 11 o'clock. She was sunbathing. The phone was, of course, right next to her on the lounger. She was not acting like a wife whose husband was on a long, dangerous drive. She was acting like a woman on vacation. 12 o'clock. She went inside, probably to make lunch. My stomach rumbled. I had not eaten. I did not care. My adrenaline was my food. My rage was my fuel. I just sat. I watched. I waited. I knew he would not wait long. If I was driving 3 hours to Houston, that meant Matt was driving 3 hours to Austin. 1 o'clock in the afternoon. And there it was. It was not his old beat-up pickup truck. It was a car I had never seen before. A sleek, bright red Jaguar F-type convertible. It purred into my driveway, loud and arrogant. My God. $100,000 car. Where did a failed man, a man who needed $50,000 just to start again, get a car like that? I knew the answer. I had paid for it. My $1.2 million had paid for that car. I watched Matt get out of the car. He was not wearing business opportunity clothes. He was wearing a silk polo shirt, cream-colored linen shorts, and expensive Italian loafers. No socks. He looked like he was arriving at a resort, which I supposed he was. My resort. He walked up to the front door. He did not knock. He did not ring the bell. He reached into his pocket. He pulled out his own key ring, and he put his own key into the lock of my front door. He had a key. He had a key to my house. All this time, all these surprise visits, it was never a surprise. It was an arrangement. He opened the door and walked inside. The door closed firmly behind him. He was in. He was in my house with my wife spending my money. I looked down at my phone. I took a deep breath. It was time to call my daughter. I was a statue in that wicker chair. My own house, my sanctuary, had just been breached. He used a key. He walked in like he lived there. How many times had this happened? How many times had I left for a business trip or a fishing weekend, and as soon as my car cleared the gates, his red Jaguar was pulling in, the arrogance of it. The disrespect. I looked at my phone. My fingers were trembling, but not with fear. It was rage. A cold, 70-year-old rage that I had not felt in decades. I had the financial proof thanks to Rick. I had the circumstance, the key, the secret arrival. Now I needed the final lock. I needed to shatter the lie Victoria had built around herself. I needed a witness. I dialed Grace. She answered immediately, her voice professional. "Hi, Dad. Did you make it to Houston?" "I'm not in Houston." I cut her off. My voice was a low whisper. "I'm in the casita. At home." The line was silent. I heard her sharp intake of breath. "Dad." "What? What's wrong? Why are you whispering?" "He's here," I said. "Matt. He just arrived. He let himself in with his own key." "What?" Her voice was a mix of confusion and disgust. "But Mom said he was—" "I need you to do something for me, honey," I said. My eyes fixed on the main house. "Right now. I need you to call your mother's cell. Ask her anything. Ask her about the weather. Ask her what she's doing for lunch. Just call her and listen. Listen to what she tells you. Dad, I don't... Please, Grace, I need to know. I need you to know. Call her now, then call me right back. Okay, she said, her voice small and scared. Okay, Dad. Calling now. I hung up. I stared at the sliding glass door of the living room. Less than 10 seconds later, I saw Victoria through the window. She was walking back and forth, phone pressed to her ear. She looked annoyed. She was gesturing with her free hand, pacing the expensive rug I bought her in Turkey. She was talking to our daughter. She was lying to her. I could see the lie in the stiff, impatient set of her shoulders. She glanced at Matt, who was now helping himself to something in our kitchen, and she rolled her eyes as if Grace's call was an interruption to their important day. She talked for maybe 30 seconds. Then she hung up. My own phone buzzed in my hand immediately. I answered it. Dad? Grace's voice was broken. It was cracking. What did she say, honey? She said she was at the spa. My eyes closed. The final piece. She said she was getting a massage and a facial, that she was treating herself because you were gone. She said she'd be off the grid for the next few hours and probably wouldn't answer her phone. Dad, Grace whispered, and I could hear her starting to cry. She sounded so normal. She lied right to me. How could she lie so easily? I felt a flash of pain for my daughter. This was her wound now, too. It's okay, baby, I whispered. You did good. I know this is hard. I have to go now. Dad, what are you going to do? I'm going to finish this, I said. I hung up the phone. I swiped the screen of my phone and opened the camera. I switched it to video mode. I held it up, steadying my hand against the window frame of the casita. I pressed the red record button. I did not have to wait long. The sliding glass door of the living room opened. Victoria came out. She was carrying 2 tall glasses of what looked like mimosas. She was wearing a silk robe. At 1 in the afternoon. Matt followed her out. He was shirtless. He was wearing just his linen shorts. My brother. Shirtless. In my house. They walked toward the lounge chairs by the deep end of the pool. They were laughing. Victoria handed Matt his drink. To us, I heard him say, his voice carrying clearly across the water. To 10 years, she replied, her voice giddy. They clinked glasses, and then she set her glass down. She stepped into him. She wrapped her arms around his neck, and they kissed. It was not a quick peck. It was not a joke. It was a long, slow, deep kiss. The kiss of 2 people who had done this 1,000 times before. A kiss of ownership, of familiarity. I did not flinch. I did not make a sound. I just held the phone steady. I zoomed in just slightly, making sure their faces were clear, making sure the background of my own house was unmistakable. I recorded as he slid his hands from her waist, down her back, and onto her robe. I recorded as she laughed against his mouth. I recorded for a full 60 seconds, an entire minute of irrefutable, undeniable proof. I had it. I had it all. The financial trail of $1.2 million. The lie to our daughter. And now, this. I pressed stop. I saved the file. I backed it up to my private cloud account, the one Rick had set up for me. The trap was sprung, and the rats were caught. I looked at the happy couple by my pool. They were sunbathing now, laughing, planning how to spend my $50,000. I stood up from the wicker chair. I unlocked the door of the casita. The afternoon sun hit me like a physical blow. I walked out of the shadows. I stepped out of the casita. The bright Texas sun hit me, making me squint. The patio stone was warm under my feet. I heard them before they saw me. I heard Victoria laugh, a high-pitched, giddy sound I had not heard in years. I heard Matt murmur something low, and she laughed again. I walked. My shoes made a soft crunching sound on the gravel path that separated the casita from the pool deck. 1 step, 2 steps, crunch, crunch. The laughter stopped, abruptly. I kept walking, not hurrying. I looked up. They were frozen. Victoria was halfway to sitting up on her lounge chair, her silk robe falling open slightly. Matt was standing by the edge of the pool, his shirtless back to me. He turned slowly. I saw his face. The easy, arrogant charm was gone. It was replaced by the pale, slack-jawed look of a man who had just seen a ghost. He jumped, literally, stumbled back a step. "Ben!" he yelled. His voice was a panicked squeak. "Ben, what? What are you doing here?" I thought. "Houston!" Victoria did not speak. She just stared. Her hand, the one holding the mimosa, trembled violently. The glass slipped from her fingers. It shattered on the stone deck. The sound was like a gunshot in the sudden silence. The orange juice and champagne spread out like a pool of blood. "Ben," she whispered, scrambling to pull her robe closed. "Ben, this isn't what it looks like." I stopped at the edge of the pool, about 10 feet away from them. I looked at my wife, her face pale with terror. I looked at my brother, his bare chest glistening with sweat and pool water. I let the silence stretch out. I let them drown in it. "It isn't what it looks like," I finally said. My voice was calm. It was so calm it scared even me. "It isn't what it looks like." I let out a small, dry laugh. "Really, Victoria?" "Because it looks like my wife in her robe at 1 p.m, drinking mimosas with my shirtless brother." "Ben, I can explain." She started standing up, her hands fluttering. "Matt he stopped by. He wasn't feeling well. He stopped by." I interrupted, still in that terribly quiet voice. "With his own key." Her face went white. Matt took a step forward. "Listen, Ben, you're misunderstanding." I said. "Am I misunderstanding the phone calls, the hundreds of calls to Houston? The 4-hour conversations at 3 a.m? Victoria stopped breathing. "Am I misunderstanding the book club?" I continued. "Or the spa day you're currently on, according to what you just told our daughter?" Victoria's hand went to her mouth. She looked like she was going to be sick. "And you, Matt," I said, turning to him. He looked like a trapped animal. "Am I misunderstanding V&M Holdings?" That hit him. His eyes widened, the color drained from his face. "Or," I said, my voice dropping even lower, "am I misunderstanding the $1.2 million you've siphoned out of my accounts for the last 10 years? The silence was absolute. This was the moment the lies were too big to hide. Victoria looked at Matt. Her face was a mask of pure panic. She was waiting for him to fix this, to charm his way out of it like he always did. But Matt was speechless. He just stared at me, his mouth opening and closing, making no sound. Victoria turned back to me, and I watched it happen. I watched the panic in her eyes die. I watched the fear curdle into something else. The terror evaporated, and what was left was cold, hard, and ugly. Her back straightened. Her chin came up. She stopped clutching her robe. She let out a long, slow breath. It was not a sigh of defeat. It was a sigh of relief. "Fine," she said. Her voice was no longer giddy or panicked. It was flat. It was cold. "Fine. You know." She looked me right in the eye, the woman I had spent my life with. "Good. I'm glad you know." She took a step not away from me but towards Matt, closing the distance between them. "I'm tired," she said, her voice dripping with venom I had never heard before. "I am so tired of hiding." I just stood there, I watched my whole life detonate right in front of me. The woman I had built this world for was standing with my brother, her face hard with a contempt I had never seen. "Yes," she said, her voice sharp and clear, cutting through the warm afternoon air. 10 years. She said it right to my face. She wanted me to know. 10 years I have loved him, she almost shouted, stepping forward to stand shoulder to shoulder with Matthew. 10 years I have had to suffer your boring, predictable, steadfast life, Ben. She spat the word steadfast like it was a curse. 10 years I have had to listen to you drone on about your company, your achievements, your concrete, your money, as if I cared, as if any of it was interesting. She was shaking with a sudden violent rage that I had never witnessed. 10 years, she sneered. I have had to live as your ornament, your perfect little trophy wife stuck in this perfect empty $1,000,000 prison you built for me. Just something else you owned. I finally found my voice. It was hollow, weak. Boring, I whispered. I gave you everything. Everything you ever asked for. This house, the cars, the trips to Paris, to Rome, the jewelry, the charity galas you loved. She laughed. It was a harsh, ugly barking sound that did not sound like her at all. You gave me things, Ben. You gave me objects, she yelled, gesturing wildly at the house, the pool, the manicured lawns. You gave me receipts. You bought me things to shut me up, to keep me quiet, to make sure your pretty little ornament was polished and smiling for your business partners. She turned then and looked at Matthew. Her entire face softened. It was a transformation so complete it ripped my heart out. Matthew, she said, her voice dropping into that intimate, purring tone I had heard through the bathroom door. Matthew gave me life. She reached out and took his hand, interlacing her fingers with his. He sees me. He listens to me. When was the last time you actually listened to me, Ben? When was the last time you asked me a single question about my dreams, my fears, my thoughts? You don't even know who I am. You just know I'm the wife of Ben Carter. She turned back to me, her eyes flashing with this new terrible fire. You were never interested in me. You were only interested in your company, your work, your precious legacy. I was just another asset, just another part of your portfolio. She's right, you know, Matt said. His voice was no longer panicked. It was smug. He stepped forward, putting his arm possessively around Victoria's waist, pulling her against his shirtless side. He was claiming her. He was marking his territory. My territory. That's right, brother. He said, that old lazy charm returning, but now it was coated in malice. I was the one who was here for her. I was the one who listened to her, who reminded her she was a woman, not just Mrs. Carter. And the $1.2 million, I asked, the words feeling like poison on my tongue. Was that listening to? Was that seeing her? Matt actually chuckled. The money he said as if it were an afterthought. No, Ben. The money was compensation. Compensation? That's right. Compensation. For 40 years of living in your shadow. 40 years of being Matt the failure, while you played Ben the successful king. 40 years of you looking down on me, judging me, handing me scraps from your table like I was some kind of dope. You were a dog, I yelled, my calm finally breaking. The gambling debts, the failed businesses I saved you from prison, I paid for every mistake you ever made. Victoria let out that sharp, ugly laugh again. Oh, Ben, she said, shaking her head slowly, as if she were talking to a very, very stupid child. You really don't see it, do you? You really are just a steadfast, simple man. She stepped away from Matt toward me. There were no gambling debts, you idiot, she sneered. There were no failed businesses for the last 10 years. I just stared at her. My mind could not process what she was saying. Those were just stories, she said, her smile widening. Stories I fed you, stories I begged you to believe. Oh, Ben, Matt's in trouble again. Oh, Ben, Just one last time. She was mimicking her own voice, the weeping, desperate tone she had used in my study. And every time, she whispered, every time you wrote a check to save him, that money went straight into our account. V&M Holdings, Victoria and Matthew. It was our retirement fund, our escape plan. Money you were too busy and too stupid to ever realize was missing. The betrayal was absolute. It was total. Matt stepped up next to her, smirking. And now you know, he said, shrugging. So, what are you going to do about it? Ben, huh? What's your big move? He looked around the patio at my beautiful house. Are you going to divorce her? Is that it? Go ahead. We don't care. Victoria smiled. Do it, Ben. Divorce me. And in Texas, a community property state. I get half of everything we own, half of the company, half of the remaining bank accounts, half of this house. Matt put his arm back around her. And half, he said, his voice full of mock pity, is just a little bit smaller than you thought it was an hour ago. About $1.2 million smaller. They laughed. Together. They laughed at me. They believed they had won. They believed they had taken everything. They had the money. They had each other. And now they thought they were going to get half of the rest. They thought I was beaten. They thought I was just a boring, steadfast old fool, with no moves left to make. They laughed. They stood there by my pool in my home, laughing at my ruin. Matt, shirtless and arrogant. Victoria, my wife, triumphant and cruel. They thought I was beaten. And in that moment, the white-hot rage that had been burning in my chest simply vanished. It evaporated, and it left behind something cold, something quiet and terribly clear. It was the engineer in me, the man who does not panic when a structure fails, but who calmly assesses the damage and finds the load-bearing walls. I looked at them, really looked at them. Two greedy, short-sighted people who had just made the biggest mistake of their lives. They had assumed I was stupid. They had assumed I was just steadfast. I reached into my pocket. I pulled out my phone. Victoria's laughter faltered. She watched me. What are you doing now? Calling the police? Not yet, I said. My voice was calm. I found Grace's number. I am calling our daughter. Matt scoffed. What, you are going to cry to Grace? Tell her her mommy was mean to you. No, I said, my finger hovering over the call button. I am calling Grace. And Rick. We are going to have a family meeting. Right now, all of us. Victoria looked at Matt, a flicker of uncertainty in her eyes. She was trying to calculate this new angle. This was not in her script, but her arrogance won out. She shrugged a perfect, elegant, dismissive gesture. Fine, she said. Call them. Call the whole world. It does not change anything. It just means they get to see what a fool their father really is. It is better they hear it from us anyway. I pressed the button. Grace, I said. I need you and Rick here. At the house, now. It is an emergency. I hung up. Now, I said to Victoria and Matt. We wait. I walked past them. I sat down in one of my patio chairs, the one in the shade. I did not invite them to sit. They stood there awkwardly by the spilled mimosa. The moment of triumph was broken. I could see the gears turning in their heads. They were confused. The old man was not supposed to be calm. He was supposed to be weeping. He was supposed to be begging. The next 30 minutes were the longest of my life. We said nothing. I just sat there. They whispered furiously to each other by the pool. I did not try to listen. I did not need to. I already knew everything they could possibly say. Finally, I heard the sound of a car in the driveway. A car door slammed. Grace and Rick appeared through the side gate. Grace was running, her face pale with panic. Dad? What is wrong, you said? She stopped dead when she saw the scene. She saw me sitting alone in the shade, and she saw her mother standing by the pool in a silk robe, holding hands with her uncle who was still shirtless. "Oh my God," Grace whispered. It is true, isn't it?" Rick stepped up beside her. He was not panicked. His face was grim, and in his hand he was carrying a thick, heavy leather-bound briefcase. Victoria saw the briefcase and her confidence returned. She must have thought it was nothing. She put on her wronged wife face. She stepped toward Grace. "Grace, honey, thank God you are here." Victoria started, her voice breaking with false emotion. "Your father, he is having some kind of breakdown. He came home early. He has been making wild accusations." Then she did the one thing I did not expect. She decided to control the narrative. She took a deep, shuddering breath. "Honey," she said, grabbing Matt's hand again, "there is no easy way to say this. Your father found out. About me. And your Uncle Matt. We are in love." She looked at Grace, expecting shock, expecting tears. Grace just stared at her mother. Her expression was unreadable. "I know, Mom," she said. Victoria's jaw dropped. The manufactured emotion vanished. What did you say?" "I said, I know." Grace repeated, her voice as cold as mine. "Or at least I suspected. The dance at the party. The way you have been different." Victoria and Matt looked at each other. This was not going according to plan. "Well," Victoria stammered, trying to regain control. "Well, then you know. Your father he is not taking it well." "No," Grace said. She took a step forward. Rick put his hand on her back, a small gesture of support. "I do not think you understand, Mom," Grace said. "I suspected you were having an affair, and that is disgusting." She looked at Matt with pure contempt. "And you are pathetic." She turned back to Victoria. "But that is not why we are here." A new silence fell. This time the confusion was all on their faces. Victoria frowned. Then why are you here? Why did he call you? Why do you have that?" She pointed finally at the heavy briefcase in Rick's hand. I stood up from my chair. The movement was slow, deliberate. I felt the eyes of everyone on me. Victoria and Matt confused. Grace and Rick steady, waiting. "Victoria," I said, my voice cutting through the patio's silence, "before you start dividing up my property, before you calculate what half of my life's work is, I just have one question." I looked past her, past my brother, and I focused on my daughter. "And it is a question for Grace." Rick stepped forward. He placed the heavy leather briefcase on the glass patio table. The sound was solid, final. He clicked the brass latches open. He did not pull out a single paper. He pulled out a thick, leather-bound binder. It was 3 inches thick, embossed with gold lettering. He slid it across the table to Grace, who stopped it with her hand. She did not open it. She just rested her hand on the cover. Victoria scoffed, a nervous, dismissive sound. "What is all this, Ben? More theater? Are you going to show us old photos? Read your will." "Victoria," I said, ignoring her. I turned my body fully to face my daughter. "Grace, honey, can you please remind your mother about the papers she signed 11 years ago?" I watched Victoria's face. She was searching her memory, trying to find the trap. 11 years ago," I prompted, "right after I came home from the hospital, after my heart attack." Victoria laughed. It was a thin, brittle sound. "Oh, that," she said, waving her hand dismissively. "I remember that. You were in a panic. You made me sign a pile of papers. It was your will, Ben. Your medical directive. Some boring estate planning. Just nonsense your lawyers cooked up." Grace looked up from the binder. Her eyes were cold. "No, Mother," she said. her voice quiet but carrying the weight of a judge's gavel. "It was not nonsense. You signed the formation documents for the Carter Family Irrevocable Trust." The word irrevocable hung in the air. Victoria's smile faltered. Her face, which had been so confident, so arrogant, went completely still. She stared at Grace. What, the trust?" "Yes," Grace said. "The legal entity that has for the past 11 years held the title to every asset you thought was community property." Matt, who had been watching this like a tennis match, suddenly looked alarmed. What does that mean?" he asked, his voice losing its smug edge. Victoria was speechless. She was just staring at Grace. "What does that mean?" she whispered. I let the silence hang for one more beat. Then I asked my question. The question I had been waiting 11 years to ask, though I never knew why I would be asking it. The question my lawyers and Rick and Grace had prepared all that time ago. "Grace," I said, my voice perfectly level, "as the sole designated trustee of that trust," I watched Victoria's eyes widen. "Can you please confirm for your mother, who is listed in that document as you know only as a dependent beneficiary?" Her mouth fell open. Dependent. What the official legally mandated monthly spending limit is on the supplemental credit card the trust issues to her in your name. I did not get to finish the question. The sound that came out of my wife was not a word. It was a horrible, choking, gagging sound. The glass of whiskey she had just picked up. She inhaled it. She doubled over, coughing and sputtering, whiskey spraying from her mouth. She was choking. And Matthew Carter, my charming, arrogant, victorious brother. His face went from tan to gray to a sickly, mottled white. He did not make a sound. He just collapsed. It was not a dramatic fall. His knees simply unlocked. He folded in on himself, sinking to the stone patio, his hands grabbing the edge of a lounge chair to stop himself from falling completely. He looked, not at me, not at Victoria. He looked at Grace. He looked at the 3-inch thick binder on the table. And in that moment, he understood. He understood faster than she did that the $1.2 million he had stolen had not been stolen from me. It had been stolen from it. It had been stolen from the trust. And my daughter, the quiet, smart financial analyst, she was not just my daughter. She was his executioner. Victoria was on her hands and knees, choking the dark whiskey, spattering the white patio stones. "Trustee," she gasped, coughing. "Dependent? What? What are you talking about?" Matt was clinging to the lounge chair, his face ashen. He was staring at me, his eyes wide with a horror that was 1,000 times more satisfying than fear. He was a rat who had just realized the entire building was a trap. "Ben," he whispered, his voice hoarse. "Ben, what did you do?" I let the question hang in the air. I looked at my wife, who was now pulling herself up. Her silk robe stained her face, a mess of running mascara and shock. "What did I do, Matt?" I said, my voice calm. "I did what I always do. I was steadfast. I was prudent. I protected my assets." I walked slowly toward the table where Grace stood, her hand still resting on that thick leather binder. 11 years ago, I said, addressing the two of them after my heart attack, I had a very serious meeting with my estate lawyers. I looked at Victoria. "You were there, my love. You just weren't paying attention. You were too busy looking at new carpet swatches for the guest wing. They advised me," I continued, "that a man in my position with my assets needed to protect his legacy, not just from taxes, but from unforeseen complications." Matt had managed to pull himself into the chair. He looked shrunken old. "So," I said, "I took their advice. I created the Carter Family Irrevocable Trust, and I moved everything into it. Everything." I ticked the items off on my fingers. This house, the lake house, the shares of Carter Technical Solutions, the art collection, the cars, the brokerage accounts, everything. Victoria was shaking her head slowly at first, then faster. No, she whispered. No, that's not possible. Our accounts are joint. The house is in both our names. I signed those papers. You signed what I told you to sign, Victoria, I said, my voice finally rising. You signed the transfer deeds. You signed the beneficiary forms. You signed everything without reading a single line. You were bored. She looked desperate. You told me it was for taxes. You told me it was to protect the money for the family. And I didn't lie, I boomed. I am protecting it. I'm protecting it from a greedy, unfaithful wife and her parasitic lover. Ben, you can't, she shrieked. You can't do this. A trust. You can dissolve it. We'll dissolve it. It's our money. I smiled. It was a cold, thin smile. I looked at Grace. Grace, honey, would you like to explain to your mother what irrevocable means? Grace opened the binder. The sound of the heavy rings clicking open echoed on the patio. She turned a page, her finger running down a line of text. Irrevocable. Grace said, her voice clear and emotionless, like a lawyer reading a verdict. It means, mother, that it cannot be revoked. It cannot be changed. It cannot be dissolved. Not without the unanimous consent of all named beneficiaries and the trustee. Victoria's eyes darted between me and Grace. Well then, fine, she spat. We'll consent. I'm a beneficiary. Ben's a beneficiary. We'll dissolve it. Grace looked up from the binder, her expression flat. You're not a primary beneficiary, mother. You're a dependent beneficiary. Your status is conditional. And Dad, she nodded at me, is only the grantor beneficiary. He can't dissolve it either. Then who can? Matt gasped. Grace looked at him. I can. As the sole trustee, I have complete unilateral control over all assets, all decisions, and all disbursements. I have held that power for 11 years. The full weight of it finally hit Victoria. She stumbled back. She looked at Grace, not as her daughter, but as her jailer. Grace, she whispered, her voice suddenly pleading, pathetic. Grace, honey, you wouldn't. I'm your mother. You wouldn't. Grace just stared at her. You lied to me, Grace said, her voice shaking with a sudden low anger. Half an hour ago, you looked me in the eye and you lied to me about being at a spa while you were here with him. Honey, I had to. You don't have to do anything anymore, Mother, Grace said, cutting her off. The only question left is what the trust decides to do with you. Grace stood up, her voice as cold and hard as the marble floor in my foyer. You seem confused, Uncle Matt. Dad isn't doing anything to you. He can't. She placed her hand flat on the leather binder. He is just a beneficiary. I am the trustee, and the trust is a legal entity, an entity that you and my mother have been stealing from for 10 years. Matt scrambled to his feet, his face slick with a sudden panicked sweat. Stolen. He tried to laugh, but it came out as a strangled bark. That's ridiculous. It was a gift from Victoria. It was her money to give community property right, Vicky. He looked at Victoria, but she was staring blankly at the spilled mimosa on the ground, unresponsive, trapped in her own shock. It was not her money, Rick Lopez said, stepping forward. My son-in-law had been quiet until now, just a presence. Now he was the professional. It was the trust's money, Mr. Carter. And that joint brokerage account. It wasn't Ben's account. It was a designated allowance account, funded by the trust with strict limitations. Limitations you and Victoria systematically bypassed, using forged electronic signatures. Rick glanced at his wife. Grace nodded. The $1.2 million, Grace continued, that was transferred to V&M Holdings. That is textbook trust fraud. It is wire fraud. It is a federal crime. You You can't prove that, Matt stammered, looking wildly between them. We already have, Rick said flatly. We've been quietly tracking V&M Holdings for 6 months. Ever since Dad, he nodded to me, first became suspicious. We have every transfer, every date. We know about the red Jaguar you bought with the funds. We know about the offshore account in the Caymans where you moved the last 200,000. Matt looked like he was going to faint. But that's not your only problem, Uncle Matt, Grace said. She opened the binder. The heavy rings clicked open with a sound like a jail cell door slamming shut. She flipped past several tabs. Let's talk about Houston, she said. Matt's head snapped up. What? What about Houston? Your apartment, Grace said, not looking up from the page. That nice high-rise in River Oaks. You've lived there for 10 years, haven't you? Ever since the Miami incident. It's my apartment, he spat. What about it? It's not, Rick corrected him. We pulled the title deeds this morning. The trust bought that apartment. We've reviewed the documents from the Miami settlement. Dad, in his generosity, didn't just pay your lawyers $400,000. He put the title of that apartment in his own name to secure the loan. I remembered that. Vaguely. The lawyers said it was safer a way to control Matt if he defaulted. I had completely forgotten. And, I said, my own voice surprising me with its strength, when I created the trust, the title of that apartment, like everything else, transferred right along with it. Grace finally looked up from the binder. She looked at her uncle, the man who had been at every Christmas, every Thanksgiving. For 10 years, the trust has been the legal owner of your home, Uncle Matt. We have been letting you live there rent-free as a courtesy, considering your family. She said the word family like it was something rotten. But now, she continued, things have changed. You can't, Matt whispered. He was shaking. We can, Rick said. As the recipient of $1.2 million in stolen funds, and as an active co-conspirator in a conspiracy to defraud the trust is hereby seizing its asset. We are evicting you. No, the notice is being filed electronically as we speak, Rick said, checking his watch. And V&M Holdings, that red Jaguar, all assets traceable to the stolen funds have been frozen, pending litigation to repay the $1.2 million. Matt stumbled backward. He looked at me, his eyes finally begging. Ben, please, brother. You can't let them, the other people I owe money to. Ben, they're not lawyers. They'll kill me, they'll find me. I looked at him. My brother. The man who had stood at my wedding as my best man. The man who had just kissed my wife. The man who had laughed about me being a fool. I stood up from my chair. That, I said, my voice cold as the ice in my heart, is your problem, Matthew. You should have thought of that before you cashed the checks. He collapsed. Not a faint. A full collapse. He fell to his knees on the hard patio stone, a broken, terrified, ruined man. He was done. And then I turned to my wife. Matt was on his knees. He was looking at me, but his eyes were not seeing me. They were seeing the end of his life. No, he whispered. The word was a dry rattle in his throat. No, Ben, please, brother. He tried to stand, but his legs seemed to be made of jelly. I didn't do this, he yelled, his voice cracking, looking at Rick. She did. It was Victoria. It was all her idea. She set up V&M Holdings. She told me to do it. Victoria, who had been a frozen statue of shock, suddenly snapped her head toward him. What? She shrieked. You bastard! You lying bastard! It was you! You said he was a fool! You said he'd never notice! They were turning on each other, the two lovers, the two conspirators. The 10-year love was evaporating in the heat of their mutual ruin. I don't care, Grace said, her voice cutting through their squabbling like a surgeon's knife. I don't care whose idea it was. Both of your names are on the electronic transfer authorizations. You are both co-conspirators. Rick stepped forward, his face grim. We've been tracking you for 6 months, Matt, he said. Ever since Dad asked me to look into that first withdrawal. We have your phone records, your text messages to Victoria, your bank statements. We know about the red Jaguar. We know about the trip to the Caymans. We know everything. No. Matt was hyperventilating now, clawing at his silk polo shirt. No, Ben, please. You don't understand. The other people. The money I borrowed for the Miami deal. The ones your lawyers paid off. That wasn't the end of it. I still owe them. They found me last year. They said I had to pay them back with interest. So the lies had lies. They're not just businessmen, Ben, he pleaded, crawling on his knees toward me. They're dangerous. They said if I didn't pay, they'd hurt me, they'd hurt Victoria, they'd hurt Grace. And your solution, I said, my voice empty of all emotion, was to steal more, to steal from me, to steal from Amu, from your own family, to pay off criminals. They said this was the only way, he cried. They helped me set up V&M Holdings. They showed me how. They said it was foolproof. They said you'd never know. And now they know you've been caught, Rick said. And the $1.2 million you laundered, and the $200,000 you skimmed off the top and hid, it's all frozen. Matt's face went completely blank with a new dawning absolute terror. They will kill me, he whispered. They will find me, and they will kill me. He looked at me, his eyes rolling back in his head. Ben, you have to protect me. You have to hide me. You're my brother. I looked down at the pathetic creature groveling on my patio stones. The man who had kissed my wife. The man who had stolen my money. The man who had laughed at me. No, Matt, I said. I'm not your brother. Not anymore. You chose your path 10 years ago when you put your hand in my pocket instead of asking for my help. You chose it again at my anniversary party. And you chose it just now when you lied about it. I turned my back on him. You chose this, I said. Now you can live with it. Grace took a final step forward. And one more thing, Uncle Matt, she said, her voice devoid of any pity. The apartment in Houston. The trust isn't just evicting you. We are seizing it as partial repayment for the stolen funds. You have 30 days to pay the $400,000 lien in full. If you don't, we take possession. And since all your other assets are frozen, you're not just broke, you're homeless. That was the final blow. The sound he made was inhuman. It was a long, low wail of a man who had just lost everything. His money, his lover, his home, and his protector. He collapsed completely, curling into a fetal position on the hot stone, sobbing. He was finished. He was ruined. And as I stood there watching this man's life end, I felt nothing. No pity, no sadness, no victory. Just a cold, empty quiet. I turned my back to my sobbing brother, and I looked at my wife. Victoria sat frozen on the lounge chair where Matthew had shoved her. Her face was a blank mask. She was not crying. She was not angry. She was just empty. She was a 68-year-old woman in a silk robe staring at the empty space where her lover, her brother-in-law, had just been. The squeal of his tires faded, leaving only the sound of the pool filter humming and a bird chirping somewhere in the oak trees. She had sacrificed her 45-year marriage. She had sacrificed her daughter, her home, her reputation, all for a man who had just called her useless and run away. I looked at her. The white-hot rage I had felt was gone. The cold, calculating need for justice was gone. I felt nothing. It was not sadness. It was not pity. It was just a void. This woman was a stranger to me. The Victoria I married, the woman I built this life for, had died a long, long time ago. This was just the empty hollow shell she had left behind. Grace stepped forward, her heels clicking softly on the stone. She did not look at her mother. She looked at Rick. "Is the perimeter secure?" she asked. "Perimeter." Rick nodded, his phone already to his ear. "The private security team is at the front gate," he said. "They have been instructed not to let Mr. Matthew Carter back onto the property. They will be here 24/7 until further notice from the trust." Victoria's head snapped up at the sound of his voice. "Security," she whispered. You're putting guards at the gate." "It's not your gate, Mother," Grace said, her voice flat, still not looking at her. "It's the trust's gate, and we are protecting the trust's assets from a co-conspirator who is now a flight risk." I need to," Victoria stammered, her hand fumbling for her phone on the table. "I need to call my lawyer." "I wouldn't bother," Rick said, not unkindly but firmly. "The lawyers you'll need to call, the criminal lawyers, will be appointed by the state, unless you have funds we don't know about. All your credit cards, including the supplemental one from the trust, have been deactivated, as of 5 minutes ago." Victoria stared at her phone. She tapped the screen. She tapped it again, harder. She was trying to make a call. She was trying to check her bank. I watched her face crumple as this new final wave of realization washed over her. She had nothing. No husband, no lover, no home, and now no money. She was truly, absolutely, and completely alone. She finally began to cry. It was not the angry, theatrical sobbing from before. It was a silent, awful, internal weeping. Her shoulders shook, her head bowed down. The great, proud, beautiful Victoria Carter was broken. "Grace," I said, my voice quiet. "Rick." They both looked at me. "Let's go inside," I said. This is done." I turned and walked back toward the main house. I did not look back at her. I could not. Rick and Grace followed me. We stepped into the cool, air-conditioned silence of the living room, sliding the glass door shut. The sound of her quiet sobbing was muffled, but it was still there. We could see her out on the patio, a small silk-robed figure huddled on the lounge chair. "Dad," Grace said, her voice soft now, all the anger gone. "Are you okay?" "No," I said honestly. "But I will be." I looked at my daughter, my smart, loyal daughter. What? What happens now to her? Grace looked at her husband, and he nodded. Then she looked back out the window at her mother. "She has 24 hours, Grace said, her voice heavy with a duty she never asked for. "The Trust's security team has their orders. They will be here at 5 p.m. tomorrow. They will escort her off the property." I thought about that. A 68-year-old woman with nothing but the clothes on her back. Where will she go? I asked the question hanging in the quiet room. Grace looked at me, her eyes filled with a sadness that mirrored my own. This was, after all, still her mother. "She's a 68-year-old woman with no job, no money, and no home," Grace whispered. "Where can she go?" I had no answer. Grace was silent for a long time, just watching the woman by the pool. Finally, she sighed. She turned to Rick. "Call the team," she said. Tell them to arrange for a one-bedroom apartment. A modest one. In a safe area. The trust will pay the first and last month's rent, and the $2,000 severance. That's it." Rick nodded. "That's generous." "It's not generous," Grace said, closing the curtains, finally blocking out the view. "It's just final." Victoria's head snapped toward the sound of his voice. Her face, which had been a mask of pure primal terror, suddenly changed. She was not afraid anymore. She was desperate. She saw her escape plan. She saw him. "Matt!" she shrieked, her voice raw. "Matthew, do something! Say something, tell them. She scrambled up from her knees and ran to him, grabbing the front of his silk polo shirt. Tell them, Matt! Tell them it was my money! Tell them you'll pay it back! Do something! She was hysterical, shaking him. All the cool, calculating arrogance was gone, replaced by the raw panic of an animal caught in a trap. Matt looked down at her hands, grabbing his shirt. His expression was unreadable. Then slowly, he lifted his head. He did not look at Victoria. He did not look at Grace or Rick. He looked at me. His eyes were not filled with fear anymore. The terror was gone. All that was left was a deep, burning, bottomless hatred. He did not yell. He did not plead. His voice was quiet, full of venom. Oh. You, he whispered. You did this. Victoria stopped, shaking him, confused. Matt, you couldn't just let me have it, could you? He said to me, his voice trembling with rage. You couldn't just let me have one thing. You always had to be the big man, the king, Ben Carter, the one who saves everyone. I didn't do anything, Matt. I said, my voice just as cold. You did this, you and her. Liar, he spat. You set me up. You set this whole thing up all those years ago. This trust. He gestured wildly at the binder on the table. This was always your plan, wasn't it? To make sure I never got a single penny. To make sure I would always be the failure, the loser, while you sat on your throne. I did it to protect my family, I said. You are my family, he roared, finally finding his voice. Or you were. No, I said the word final. You stopped being my family the day you decided my wallet was more important than my trust. You stopped being my brother when you kissed my wife. That was it. The finality of it. He stared at me for one long, terrible second. The hatred in his eyes was so pure, it was almost beautiful. And then he turned. He turned his back on me. He turned his back on Grace. And he turned his back on Victoria. He started walking. He walked right past the spilled mimosa, his expensive Italian loafers stepping through the puddle. He walked toward the side gate. Victoria watched him go. Her mind could not comprehend it. This was not part of the plan. The lover, the partner, the man she had sacrificed everything for. Matthew, she said, her voice small. He did not stop. Matthew, she screamed, her voice breaking. Where are you going? What about me? What about us? He reached the gate. His hand was on the latch. He stopped. He did not turn around. He just looked back over his shoulder. His face was a mask of pure, cold contempt. You, he said. His voice was flat. You're on your own. He looked at her, the woman he had been kissing 30 minutes ago. He's right. You're a dependent beneficiary. You're useless to me. He opened the gate. I've lost everything, he said, his voice hollow. You deal with him yourself. And he walked out. He did not run, he walked. He walked out of the yard, out of the gate, out of her life. We heard the red Jaguar's engine roar to life. We heard the squeal of tires on the pavement as he tore away from the curb. He was gone. Victoria stood there, frozen, her hand outstretched. She stared at the empty gate. Her face, which had been contorted with rage and then panic, just crumbled. It was a complete and total collapse. She had lost her husband. She had lost her lover. She had lost her money. She had lost her home. All of it. In the span of 10 minutes, she made a small broken sound, a sound from deep in her chest, and she sank to the ground, her silk robe puddling around her like a queen whose kingdom had just turned to dust. She had no one left. She was utterly and completely alone. I stood there looking down at the woman who had been my wife for 45 years. She was a heap on the stone patio. Her sobs were ugly, desperate, gasping sounds. The great, proud, beautiful Victoria Carter reduced to this. I waited to feel something. I waited for the satisfaction of victory. I waited for the lingering sting of anger. I waited for the deep, familiar ache of sadness of loss. Nothing came. It was not a numbness. It was a stillness. A profound, cold, empty quiet. It was the sound of a 45-year-old door finally clicking shut. The love I had felt for her, the life I had built for her, the man I had been for her, it had all been based on a lie. And now that the lie was gone, there was nothing left. I was not looking at my wife. I was looking at a stranger who had been living in my house, sleeping in my bed, and stealing my money for a decade. I thought of our 40th anniversary 5 years ago. We had renewed our vows on a beach in Hawaii. She had cried, her voice thick with emotion, as she read the vows she had written herself. She had called me her rock, her steadfast heart, her safe harbor. I realized now she was crying with joy, because she and Matt had probably just cleared another 100,000 from my account. I realized the safe harbor was just a bank. The woman I loved, the one I married, the one who blew me a kiss at the party, she did not exist. She had died 10 years ago, or perhaps she had never existed at all. This weeping creature on the ground was just the fraud that remained. I felt nothing for her. Nothing at all. The sound of her crying was just noise. Grace stepped forward. She looked at me, a quick, questioning glance. I gave a slight nod. Handle it. She understood. She turned to the woman on the ground. Her voice was not cruel. It was not angry. It was just final. It was the voice of the trustee. Mother. Victoria looked up, her face a ruin of makeup and tears. Her eyes were wide, desperate, searching for an ally, for the daughter she knew. Grace. Baby. Please. You have to make him. You have to. Mother. Grace repeated, cutting her off. You have 24 hours. Victoria blinked. Her sobs caught in her throat. What? What did you say? You have 24 hours to vacate the property, Grace said, her voice clear and steady. The trust's security team will be here tomorrow at 5 p.m. If you are still on the premises, they have been authorized to escort you out. Forcibly, if necessary. The concept did not seem to compute. No. Grace, you can't. This is my home, I have rights. Community property, I'll call a lawyer, You have no rights, Mother, Grace said, her patience clearly gone. This is not community property. It hasn't been for 11 years. It is the property of the Carter Family Irrevocable Trust. And you are a beneficiary in default. A beneficiary who has actively conspired to defraud the trust. You have no rights here. You are trespassing. I'll go, Victoria shrieked, finally understanding the threat. She scrambled to her feet, trying to find some shred of her lost dignity. Fine. I'll pack my things. I'll take my jewelry. I'll take my car. I don't need him. I don't need any of this. She made a move toward the house, a panicked rush to grab her valuables. Mrs. Carter! Rick stepped in her path. He was solid, immovable. He was holding a single sheet of paper. What now? Victoria spat at him. This is a list of items you are permitted to remove, Rick said, his voice clinical, as if reading a corporate memo. Personal clothing, toiletries, any items you purchased with your own funds in the last 11 years, though our records show no such funds existed. A security officer will accompany you while you pack. Victoria snatched the paper from his hand. Her eyes scanned it wildly. What is this? Where is my jewelry, my diamonds? The 3-carat diamond necklace Ben gave me. My car, my Mercedes. The jewelry, Grace said, was purchased by Dad and transferred into the trust as part of the Art and Valuables Addendum. It is an asset of the trust. The car is leased by the trust. The lease will be terminated tomorrow. Victoria's face was white. You are leaving me with nothing. You are throwing me out onto the street with nothing. She looked at me, her eyes begging. Ben, Ben, you can't let them. This isn't you. This isn't me doing it, Victoria. I said, my voice hollow. This is the consequence. This is the legal entity you signed. No, Grace said. The trust is not leaving you with nothing. Victoria looked up, a wild, desperate hope in her eyes. You mean, the trust, Grace said, in its generosity, has authorized a severance. We have secured a one-bedroom furnished apartment in a modest complex in Round Rock. The first and last month's rent will be paid, and you will receive a stipend of $2,000 a month for 12 months only. She paused. After that, you are on your own. $2,000, Victoria whispered. It was a sound of pure horror. $2,000, I spend that on shoes. Then I suggest you find a job, Mother, Grace said. Quickly! A job. Victoria repeated the word, sounding foreign, disgusting. I'm 68 years old. What? What am I supposed to do? Grace just looked at her. She had no answer, and she was not going to offer one. This was the consequence. This was the rock bottom Victoria had spent 10 years digging for herself. Victoria looked at me, one last desperate final time. Her face was stripped of all its beauty, all its arrogance. It was just the face of a terrified, old, desperate woman. Ben, she whispered. Ben, please. 45 years. Please. I looked at her. I looked at the stranger who had stolen my life, my money, and my brother. And I turned away. I turned my back on her and walked toward the house. Ben! She shrieked, her voice tearing. Ben, don't you walk away from me! Don't you dare walk away from me! After everything I am, your wife, Ben! I did not stop. I did not flinch. Rick opened the sliding glass door for me. Grace followed right behind me. We stepped into the cool, quiet living room. Rick slid the heavy glass door shut. The sound of her screaming was instantly muffled. It was distant. It was the sound of a television playing in another room. She was outside. We were inside. It was done. Grace and Rick stood there waiting for me to say something, to give an order, to break down. I did none of those things. I felt empty. I felt old. I felt tired. So incredibly, deeply tired. Dad, Grace asked, her voice soft again. I need to sit down, I said. My legs felt like they were filled with wet sand. I walked past them out of the grand living room, down the long, cool hallway. I walked past the grand staircase where we had taken family photos. I walked past the dining room where we had hosted decades of Thanksgivings. I walked past the life we had built. I walked into my study, the one place that had always been mine. I closed the heavy oak doors. The click of the latch was the only sound. I did not turn on the lights. I just stood in the darkness. The adrenaline that had been coursing through me for the past 4 hours finally drained away, and it left a crushing, bone-deep exhaustion in its place. I had won. I had saved my assets. I had exposed the traitors. I had my proof. I had my victory. So why? Why did I feel so utterly and completely exhausted? I sank into my leather chair, the darkness of the room a cold comfort. I had a feeling this was only the beginning. I sat in the heavy silence of my study, the door closed, the sounds of the house muted. The adrenaline was gone, leaving only a hollow, echoing exhaustion. My life, my 45-year marriage, my relationship with my brother, it was all a crater. It was all gone. I heard a soft knock. Dad. Grace's voice was gentle. Come in, I said. She entered, closing the door quietly behind her. Rick was not with her. He was still out in the living room, making calls, handling the legal machinery that was now grinding into motion. Grace just stood there for a moment looking at me. "Are you okay?" she asked. I shook my head. "No, but I will be." I looked at my daughter. My smart, capable, cold-eyed daughter who had just dismantled her mother's life with the precision of a surgeon. "Thank you, Grace," I said, my voice hoarse. "Thank you for protecting me, for all of this. That binder, that was... It was necessary, Dad," she said, finally letting her own exhaustion show. She sat in the leather chair opposite my desk. "I've been dreading this day for 11 years. I stared at her. 11 years. You knew about her and Matt." Grace shook her head. "No, not for sure. I didn't have proof, not like that." She shuddered, thinking of the video I had shown her. I suspected. I saw the glances, the whispers, the way he looked at her when he thought no one was watching, the way she defended him. It was always too much. Too desperate. She leaned forward, her eyes locking on mine. "But Dad, that's not... The trust wasn't the only secret." A new knot of dread formed in my stomach. "What now? What do you mean, Grace?" She looked down at the heavy briefcase Rick had left on my desk. It was not the big 3-ring binder. It was his personal briefcase. She clicked it open. Inside, she pressed a hidden clasp, and a false bottom lifted, revealing a slim, fireproof document case. She pulled it out and placed it on my desk. It was not thick, but it felt heavy. "Dad," she said, her voice very low. 10 years ago, when Mom started making those transfers to Matt, when we saw the first $50,000 transfer, the one after the Miami bailout, Rick and I knew. We knew she wasn't just helping him. We knew something was wrong. I did not understand. "But the trust, you said..." "The trust was already in place," she said. "But you were still the grantor beneficiary. You still had some influence. And Mom had you. She could still cry and beg and manipulate you into telling me the trustee to release funds. She could still get to you." I remembered her fury just an hour ago. The $50,000. She had been so sure I would cave. "Rick and we were worried," Grace continued. "We were worried that she would eventually wear you down. That she and Matt would find a way to bleed the trust dry slowly over years. That they would convince you to make bad investments or sign new papers. We had to protect you, not just from them, but from your own kindness." She opened the document case. Inside were bank ledgers and a single incorporation document. "What is this?" I whispered. "It's called the GRL Legacy Fund," she said. "Grace, Ricardo, Lopez. For the past 10 years, Dad," she said, her voice shaking just a little. "Every time Mom transferred $10,000 to V&M Holdings, Rick and we transferred $20,000 from your main operating accounts into this new hidden fund. A fund under my name. A fund she knew nothing about. A fund you knew nothing about." I was stunned. I could not speak. My daughter had been moving my money behind my back. "Why?" I finally managed to get out. Her eyes filled with tears. It was the first real emotion I had seen from her all day. "To protect you from yourself, Dad," she said, her voice cracking. "To save you from the goodness they were exploiting. I watched her manipulate you. I watched her cry on demand to get Matt out of trouble. And I knew one day they would take everything if we let them." She took a deep breath, wiping her eyes, the professional mask snapping back into place. She pushed a single bank statement across the desk to me. "Mom and Matt, they stole $1.2 million over 10 years. I looked down at the paper, at the final balance. My vision swam. Grace, I whispered, pointing at the number. What? What is this? That, Dad, she said, is the money we saved for you, the money they didn't know existed, the money they couldn't touch. I read the number, but my brain refused to accept it. Dad, she said, her voice soft. The 1.2 million Mom stole. It's nothing. Your total assets, your real assets, are just over $80 million. She tapped the paper. And 50 million of that is in this fund. Safe, secure, under my name, untouchable, by anyone but you. I stared at the number on the statement. $50 million. My mind simply stopped. It could not process the zeros. I looked up at Grace, my daughter, my quiet, brilliant 42-year-old daughter. For 11 years, she had been running a silent parallel operation, not just as my employee, but as my guardian. She was not just a financial analyst. She was a fortress. She had seen the weakness in me, the vulnerability I refused to admit. My kindness, as she called it. My desperate, foolish need to keep the peace, to maintain the illusion of the perfect family, to buy loyalty from people who had none to give. While Victoria and Matt were bleeding me, my daughter had been applying a tourniquet. She had been secretly saving my legacy, one $20,000 transfer at a time. You, I started, my voice failing me. You did all this. For 10 years, you never said a word. I did it to protect the family. Dad, she said softly, her voice full of a weary tenderness. The real family. You, me, Rick, the grandkids, the legacy, the thing you actually built. She reached across the desk and gently closed the fireproof case. You deserve to rest, Dad, she said. You deserve to be happy. You've worked your whole life. You shouldn't have to spend your retirement fighting off parasites. Parasites. That was the word. A hollow, aching gratitude filled my chest, so powerful it almost knocked the wind out of me. I had spent 45 years trying to protect a woman who was robbing me, and I had been completely blind to the daughter who was tirelessly, secretly saving me. I stood there speechless, and in the heavy silence of my study, I heard it. Music. Faintly through the heavy oak doors, the sound of the band wafted in. My God. The party. The party was still going on. 200 guests were still out there drinking my liquor, eating my food, clinking glasses to a 45-year marriage that had just been executed, field-dressed, and buried in the span of an hour. The sheer horrifying absurdity of it hit me. They were out there, laughing, and my wife was a ruined woman sitting on the patio. My brother was a fugitive driving a stolen red Jaguar hunted by criminals. And I was $50 million richer than I had been this morning. Grace must have heard the music too. Rick can handle the guests, she said quickly. He can make an announcement. Say there's been a family emergency. No, I said. A sudden strange clarity washed over me. The exhaustion was still there, a heavy weight in my bones, but it was now secondary to this new cold purpose. No, I repeated. I'll handle this. I stood up from my chair. I looked at my reflection in the dark window. I was a 70-year-old man, a fool who had been played for a decade, a king who had just discovered his entire kingdom was safe thanks to his princess. I straightened my tuxedo jacket. I ran my hand over my silver hair. I smoothed my silk tie. The tie Victoria had picked out for me that morning, calling me her handsome, steadfast man. A grim smile touched my lips. I walked to the study door and pulled it open. The sound of the party washed in louder now. A generic, upbeat jazz tune. Rick was in the hall on his phone, his voice low and urgent. Yes, freeze all assets associated with V&M Holdings. File the injunction immediately. He saw me nodded once, his face all business. I walked past him. I walked down the long, cool hallway, past the photos of our happy family, past a portrait of Victoria from 20 years ago, past a photo of Matt and me as boys long before the poison set in. I stepped into the grand foyer, and I saw her. Victoria. She was no longer on the patio. She had made it as far as the bottom of the grand staircase. She was just sitting there, on the cold marble. She was still in her silk robe now, stained with whiskey and dirt from the patio. Her perfect hair was a mess. Her makeup was gone, leaving pale tracks on her face. She was just a small, old, broken woman. She looked up as I approached, her eyes wide red and completely empty. "Ben," she whispered. It was not a plea. It was just a sound. I did not stop. I did not look at her. I did not slow my pace. I looked straight ahead. I walked right past her, past the staircase she had always descended like a queen coming to her court. I walked toward the living room, toward the light, toward the laughter, toward the music. I stepped into the main ballroom. The party was in full swing. People were clustered around the bar, talking on the terrace. No one had noticed the hosts had disappeared. The booze was still flowing. The band was playing a slow song now. I saw Grace. She had followed me. She was standing near the entrance, watching me, her face full of concern. She was worried about what I would do. Would I break down? Would I make a scene? I looked at my daughter, my real partner, my true heir, the one who had stood by me even when I was too blind to see it. The band was playing "The Way You Look Tonight." I walked across the empty dance floor. I walked right up to my daughter. She looked startled. "Dad, what are you doing?" I did not say anything about her mother on the stairs. I did not say anything about the $50 million. I just looked at her. "Grace," I said, my voice thick. I think I owe you a dance." Her eyes widened. "And," I added, my voice cracking just a little, "I probably owe you the company." She laughed, a real sudden laugh that was half a sob. "Dad, don't be—" "I'm serious," I said. "But we can talk about that later." I held out my hand. The same hand that my wife had ignored just a few hours ago. The hand of a steadfast, boring old man. "May I have this dance?" I asked. "My partner." Grace's eyes filled with tears, but she was smiling. It was the same smile of pure delight I had seen on Victoria's face when she was texting her lover. But this one was real. This one was for me. She placed her hand in mine. "Yes, Dad," she whispered. "Yes, you may." I led her onto the floor. I put my arm around my daughter's waist, and we began to dance. The party swirled around us, but they were just ghosts. There were only two people in that room. A father who had finally realized who his true family was, and the daughter who had been protecting him all along. That night, I learned family isn't 45 years of history or shared blood. It's loyalty. I spent my life being steadfast for a wife who saw me as an ATM and a brother who saw me as a fool. My kindness without boundaries was just blindness. While I built a fortress for a traitor Victoria, my daughter Grace was silently building another one to protect me. The greatest betrayals and the truest loyalties both come from inside your own home. I stopped trusting the illusion and finally put my faith in the one person who was truly loyal. If you have ever felt underestimated by the very people you helped build up, or if you believe that the truth, no matter how painful, is always worth fighting for, please hit that like button. It lets this old man know you are listening. And make sure you subscribe to the channel. Because my story was not over, not by a long shot. The battle for the trust was just the beginning.